I am going to introduce Father Stephen Fields to give our invocation, but before I do, I need to correct a faux pas which I made at the library a while ago. Those of you who know me will understand how such a faux pas would have been possible. I've been informed by no less an authority than my brother Frank, confirmed by several others, that when I spoke at the end of the library program about the Mass, I said that the celebrant would be Father Stephen Fields from Notre Dame. Jack, I hope you're not overly embarrassed by that faux pas. It was an honest mistake. Father Stephen Fields will give our invocation for us.
Tony, just for that, I think I'll say grace in Latin. And the class of 67 will be no stranger, I'm sure, to Latin. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Benedict nos Domine et haec tua dona quae de tua largitate sumpturi sumus per Christum Dominum nostrum. Amen.
Would the Georgetown chimes please come forward? The chimes are going to sing 3 songs, and then we will commence dinner service. Chimes, please come forward. Just 2.
We meet again tonight, boys, with mirth and song. Let melody flow. Wherever we go, we dwell in friendship ever so true and strong, and sorrow never know. We laugh and sing and merry be tonight, my boys. We laugh and sing and merry be tonight. We laugh and sing and merry be tonight, my boys. We laugh and sing and merry be. Welcome the time, my boys, we meet again.
The chimes are going to sing one more song before dinner by special request. It was I who asked that this particular song be sung before dinner because one of those to whom it is dedicated is a little 1-year-old pixie who is liable to nod off to sleep before the chimes sing after dinner. This song is dedicated to Lauinger lassies who live south of the Red River. Claire Lauinger, Phil's wife, Jennifer and Ann, Phil and Claire's daughters, Allison, Claire, and Natalie, their daughters, Kathleen, Frank's wife, Patty, Frank's daughter-in-law, Phyllis and my daughter, Chrissy, and little 4-year-old Gracie and 1-year-old Claire.
All right. Well done. Wow. Sure. That's what I thought.
You got an A?
Dum 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 dum.
There's a yellow rose in Texas that I am going
see. Nobody else will love her half as much as me. She runs around her Clementine and sing of Rosalie. But the yellow rose of Texas is the only girl for me. Doom, 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 doom. She's the sweetest little rosebud that Texas ever knew. Her eyes are bright as diamonds, they sparkle like the dew. You can talk about your Clementine and sing of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas is the only girl for me. Eyes of Texas are upon you all the livelong day. The eyes of Texas are upon you. You cannot get away. Do not think you can escape them at night or early in the morn. The eyes of Texas are upon you till Gabriel blows his yellow roses in Texas that I am gonna sing. Glory, glory, hallelujah to the grand old U.S.
Go Tigers!
What you're going to hear now is the 75th version of the Georgetown chimes. Did I get that right? 75? And we're gonna feature them only on this song and one other.
By yon bonny banks and yon bonny brae, by the sunshine's warm on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love will end to meet again, by the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again, by the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. 'Twas there that we parted in yon shady glen, by the steep, steep slopes of Ben Lomond, where deep in purple hues the Highland hills we view, and the moon shining out in the gloaming. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again, by the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. The wee birdies sing and the wildflowers spring, and in sunshine the water daughters are sleeping. But the broken-hearted can a second spring again, and all the woeful may cease from their greeting. Oh, you'll take the high road, and I'll take the low, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But I and my true love will never meet again. By the bonny, bonny banks of Loch
Oh, yikes. That's going to throw me off.
Someone better sing them.
Age's horse is in a snowdrift. Page's sleigh is upside down, and my head is reeling, reeling, as I stagger into town. Let the student's lamp still burning cast its gleam upon the snow, so that I, from Hamp returning, may find my way to home. Let the student's lamp still burning cast its gleam upon the snow, so that I, from Hamp returning, may find my way to
Don Ross.
As Donnie Ross left,
This is a song that John Reed, class of '67, made famous during their years, called "Turnaround," and Donnie Ross, class of '71, excuse me, took it on afterwards, and he's going to do that now. Yep. I'm going to grab a guitar.
Where are you going, my little one, little one? Where are you going, my baby, my own? Turn around and you're two, turn around and you're four, turn around and you're a young girl going out of my door. Turn around, turn around, turn around, and you're a young girl going out of my door. Where are you going, my little one, little one? Dirndls and petticoats, where have they gone? Turn around and you're tiny, turn around and you're grown, turn around and you're a young wife with babes of your own. Turn around, turn around, turn around, and you're a young wife with babes of your own. Where are you going, my little one, little one? Where are you going, my baby, my own? Turn around and you're two. Turn around and you're four. Turn around and you're a young girl going out of my door. Turn around, turn around, turn around, and you're a young girl going out of my door. Thank you.
I wander today to the hill, Maggie, to watch the scene below. The creek and the creaking old mill, Maggie, that we used to love long ago. The green grove is gone from the hill, Maggie, where first the daisies sprung. The creaking old mill is still, Maggie, whence you and I were young. But now we are aged and gray, Maggie, the trials of life nearly done. Let us sing of the days that are gone, Maggie, since you and I were young. Since you and I were young.
What's the song?
Those of you who are old enough know that when you get older, you don't remember all the words. If you ever go across the sea to Ireland, then maybe at the closing of your day, you will sit beside the Turvan and the Clonha to watch the barefoot Godsons always bay, just to hear again the ripple of the Stroud stream, the women in the meadows making hay, or to sit beside a turf fire in the cabin, or watch the Padford Gossams at the play. For the breeze is blowing o'er the sea from Ireland, are perfumed by the heather as they blow. And the women in the uplands digging praties speak a language that the strangers do not know. For the strangers came and tried to teach us their ways. They scorned us just for being what we are. But they might as well go casting after moonbeams or light a penny candle from a star. And if there is going to be a life hereafter, and somehow I'm sure there's going to be, I will ask my God to let me make my heaven in that dear old land across the Irish Sea.
There's some people I'd like to thank in particular for their being here tonight. I would like first of all to thank all of the members of the Chimes who are here. We did not extend an invitation to all of the Chimes to come to this Day of Remembrance. It was those who were in school at the time that our brother Phil, class of 58, was in school. Our brother Frank, class of 62, was in school. Joe and my year, 67. And then the Chimes who were singing at the time the library was dedicated in 1970. And I will say that among those years, those Chimes, there is virtually a 100% attendance here tonight, and we deeply appreciate that. I would also like to thank the more than 50 members of Joe's family who are here. Joe's brothers and sisters who are living, Phil, Frank, Mary, and my sister Fran was going to be here. She had to cancel 24 hours ago because of a sickness in the family, but she sends her regrets for not being here and her warm regards to all of you. There are also many Lauingers here from two younger generations. Most of them never knew Joe because he died before they were born, but we deeply appreciate their being here. And in spite of the fact that they never knew him, they have loved him all these years nonetheless. There are a number of family members here who are named for Joe. Phil has a grandson, Joe Lofgren, who is named for Joe. Frank has a son, Joe Lauinger, or Lauinger, or however it is that you pronounce that name, who's named for Joe. Phyllis and I have a son, Joseph Michael, who's named for Joe. And we have two grandsons who are here who are named for Joe. Molly's son, Joseph Quinn Caesars, and Michael's son, Joey Lauinger. And let me mention, too, that Bobby and Maury Flanagan have a son named for Joe, their oldest. Their oldest, for whom I am honored to be godfather. I have another faux pas to apologize for. When Yellow Rose of Texas was dedicated to a lot of Lauinger lassies from the state of Texas, there was one other whom I meant to ask that we dedicate that song to, and I failed to do so. Pat Struble McLaughlin. I'd also like to thank Bobby Sullivan for being here tonight. Bobby is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was Joe's closest friend through grade school and high school and up until the time of Joe's death. And Bobby has been just as good a friend to Joe these last 50 years as he was during the 24 years prior. Every single year for the last 50 years, Bobby Sullivan has had a mass offered for Joe on his birthday. There's one other longtime friend of Joe's from Tulsa who's here that I'd like to thank, and that's Frank Keating. Frank and his wife Kathy are here. Frank held some senior positions in the Justice Department years ago in the Reagan administration. He also served as governor of Oklahoma for 8 years. But the thing for which he's best known and most loved is that he was the president of the Yard in 1965 and 66. As you know from the program in the library, we had a committee that did a lot of work in arranging this Day of Remembrance. And one of our committee members who did yeoman's work with regard to researching the military service of our classmates in the class of '67 was John Toohey. John spent countless hours and days, weeks, months, pursuing as much information as he could glean about our classmates' military service. And he was ably helped in that project by Fred Gretsch, who is also a member of our committee. If John Toohey would please come up now for a presentation, recognition of members of our class who served in the military.
Thank you, Tony. I was told by a couple people on a committee conference call not to say anything funny.
Shouldn't be too hard, John.
Jeff Ritaliata reassured them all that they picked the right guy. And so if you laugh, you're going to get me in trouble. It was only at our class of '67 50th welcome ceremony, our 50th reunion welcome ceremony 2.5 years ago, that we first learned of 3 other classmates who, in addition to Joe, were killed in Vietnam. The school has no such records, nor our Army ROTC office, nor our government military records readily accessible. And among those who served in Vietnam from our class, some here tonight are servicemen who've since suffered ongoing trauma from the war. We in the class of '67 graduated at a time when our nation was at war. Many at Georgetown, particularly whose parents had served in World War II, believed, at least in principle, in the concept of military service. We further believed in stopping the spread of communism and defending human freedom in Vietnam. Most of us signed up voluntarily one way or another, though we knew we were likely headed to Vietnam, which we accepted with good-natured resignation and a sense of duty. For tonight, and the class military service summary at your tables, we queried the class by email, telephone, and word of mouth over 2 years. We turned up 55 living classmates who served in Vietnam during the Vietnam era, plus 14 now deceased, a total of 69 from the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. We know the list is incomplete. One reason is the aging of class contact information, plus 150 classmate deaths since graduation. Please let me know afterward if you see any omissions, because we're sure they're there. So we will now recognize our Vietnam-era veterans present by certain groupings and ask you to stand as I call your name. The groups are in no particular priority because all of us were subject to the orders we received and either went or would have gone to Vietnam. Some received orders to fill other needs in other places, some in support of Vietnam. Some volunteered for Vietnam. So please stand when I call your name, and please hold your applause until the end when I've called everyone. First, serving stateside, present tonight, Joe Flahive. Is Joe here? He was, I know I saw him at church. Bob Lissett. Steve Mininger. And Joe Swan. Please stand. And reservists, Paul Cudahy and Vin Roque. Serving in Italy, Joe O'Brien. Serving in Korea, Bob Flanagan. Serving in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Frank Lacey. Thailand, Vietnam support, Fred Gretsch. Serving in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, present tonight, 18. Brian Asplund. Bill Casey. Ernie Catucci. John Depew. John Dolan. Pat Dwyer. Tony Lauinger. Tom Lydon. Peter Matlin. Tim McCollum. Steve McGoldrick. Dennis O'Hara. Jeffrey Taliata. Donald Schaller. John Toohey, and Michael Zenz. May we have a round of applause for those standing in recognition of their service. Thank you. Names of other classmates, living classmates who served in Vietnam and not here tonight are in your summary. We'd like to name 7 additional classmates who served in Vietnam who are subsequently deceased. Geraldine Bradley, Hank Dorsey, Steve Curbs, Roland Marcotte, Chime John Reed, Brendan Ryan, and Guy Smith. Classmate Geraldine Jerry L. Clark Bradley, graduate of the nursing school, served in Vietnam as an Army captain. She is the only female from our class we're aware of who served there. recognizing that there are many here from the list I just read who would warrant individual merit, we would be remiss without a few special words tonight about Army infantry officers Tim McCollum and John Dolan. As two extremely modest and low-key guys, we may be taking a liberty because we did not clear these mentions with them, but their information is public because of its significance. Tim, would you stand for a second? I know you're going to be mad at me. Tim was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, second in importance only to the Congressional Medal of Honor, for extraordinary heroism, leading his platoon in the hills of the infamous Ashaw Valley, engaged in a fierce firefight with the NVA. Tim undertook a systematic vertical flanking maneuver and then swept down and through the enemy emplacements and destroyed them. With another soldier, he evacuated a wounded soldier through enemy bunkers and positions, returning the wounded soldier to safety. Having done that, he made his way back to his men through the same treacherous fire. Tim also received a Purple Heart. Tim's wife, Kathy, is with them here tonight. Thank you. Salute. John Dolan, would you stand, please? He's going to kill me, too. I know it. Where is John? Would you please? John Dolan was awarded the Silver Star for his actions as Army Rifle Platoon Leader in the first day of the week-long battle for control of Nui Chan Mountain. By the end of the week, he received a battlefield promotion and was made company commander. We are also honored to have here with John and Reese, John F. Dolan II. JD, please stand. Like his dad, JD was an Army infantry captain, and like his father, served in the 10th Mountain Division, where his platoon was in the same company his dad commanded in Vietnam. For JD, that deployment was Iraq. JD also did 3 deployments in Afghanistan. One thing John Dolan, Tim McCullum have in common, and JD, if you talk to, hear, or read about them, is their overarching loyalty to their men and the care they took of them. Thank you, guys. Thank you. In addition, class members received 3 Distinguished Service Medals, 2 more Silver Stars, 2 Legions of Merit, over 20 Bronze Stars, 5 Purple Hearts, 8 Meritorious Service Medals, 5 Air Medals, and earned 7 Combat Infantrymen's badges, and that's all we know of. Our ranks included an Army Brigadier General, right from our ROTC ranks. Is John Depew here? John, would you stand for a second? I apologize. I apologize because when you followed me in the library this afternoon, I was supposed to introduce you because maybe by then not everybody knew who you are, but hopefully now they do. Our Air Force, either Air Force Colonels Chris Kristen or Michael Zenz here. Thank you, sir. So two are here tonight, as you know. And a special welcome back home to Jake Coakley. He may have left. I hope we didn't. Is Jake here? To Jake Coakley, who was at Georgetown for part of our college years. Jake was a great pal of Joe's, and his father was a Georgetown classmate of Joe and Tony's father. Jake was a decorated infantry officer in Vietnam. Jake, we salute you and we welcome you back. And I'd like to recommend a great book and a great read, if you haven't already, available on Amazon, last I knew. It's titled Not by the Book, A Combat Intelligence Officer in Vietnam by classmate Eric Smith. With us here tonight, as you know. Are Eric and Jan still? Oh, no, no. Somebody please tell them that our timing was just off. And again, finally, I'd like to thank Fred Gretsch again for all of his hard work and energy in producing the class history in front of you. Enormous work over a long time. Fred, I hope we can still talk on the phone from time to time. I'm going to be lonely. Outside at the same table where we got our name tables. Sorry, when I named people present who served in Vietnam, I ran into a Bill Murray over cocktails who was not on my list. The Marine Corps. Is Bill Murray present? I'm sorry, Bill. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Apart from our class of 67, there are several others present who have served our country in uniform. Tony will shortly introduce you to two special guests who had distinguished military careers, Roger Arango and Tom Goff. Joe and Tony's brothers, Phil and Frank, both served. And two other members of Joe's family, Navy Captain Richard Lofgren and Naval Reservist Joe Lofgren, are currently serving. And we know there are still more here tonight who served, including members of the Chimes, including Dr. Ed Kelly and Phil Murray, who both served in Vietnam. Are you two? Right. Thank you. And Brian Callahan, Dave Costco, Fred Costco, Dick Lynch, John O'Brien, the infamous Kevin O'Brien, Dr. Bob Redfield, Bill Ryan, and Dave Walsh, who served elsewhere during the era. All, please stand. Thank you, guys. Is there anyone else present who served their country in the military or at a senior service grade that we have failed to mention? Who did? I got it. The process is impossible. We want to make sure Fred and I are going to get your names. They're going to go on the roster, and This history is for the posterity of our class going forward, obviously, and not just for tonight. Apologies. And plus, we're getting old, you know, very hard. Thank you. My participation tonight for me has been an honor of the highest possible order. Thank you.
When Father Fields gave his beautiful homily at Mass, he made reference to an essay that was written recently, a reflection on action from 50 years ago that was written by Lieutenant Colonel Tom Goff. Tom was a very close friend of Joe in Vietnam. They served together, they worked together, they fought together. Tom is from New Braunfels, Texas. He is a retired attorney. He spent 30 years in the service. He received the Combat Infantry Badge himself and 2 Bronze Stars. But what is most relevant about Tom Goff for our gathering tonight is that he and Joe were very close, and Tom is going to come up now and offer his reflection of his friendship with Joe.
Good evening. I am so honored to be here tonight, and I shouldn't start out with an apology, but I'm from South Texas, and the mesquite and the cedar is blooming right now, and I'm so allergic to it, so I'm sorry if my voice is not like it should be. But I am truly honored to be here and to be with Joe's family and friends and classmates. And Tony, I know I've got a 5-minute rule, but I've waited 50 years to be here, so I'm going to tell the story. And I also, if I may, this is a personal privilege, the class of '67. I am just so honored to be with y'all. And when I looked at that list and the people who served in the military from the class of '67, and I'm not sure it's really appreciated by y'all and by the public that 50% of the deaths in Vietnam, 25,000 men, were in 1968 and 1969. And that burden fell directly on the class of '67. And when I hear stories about the Oshawa Valley and the incredible bravery and service from this class, it just brings so much credit to y'all, and I really salute you, and I really honor you. I'm class of '68, so it's just, it was really a totally different war for my class and later classes. But you all grew up with Joe. You knew him his whole life. You went to school with him. You went to church with him. You went to this great university with him. And you knew who Joe was. I knew Joe for 100 days. 100 days is all. And that's why it's so important for me to come and tell you who the Joe I knew, because I think that 100 days defines his life. Because I got to the unit that Joe was in, Charlie Company, 1st 69th Armor, in October of 1969. And just at that particular time, the scout platoon leader before Joe was wounded, and so there was a vacancy. I think that's the only reason I ended up, I was armor officer, but I knew nothing about tanks. I knew nothing about Vietnam. And so Captain Lindsay, our company commander, a great company commander, took me aside and said, I'm going to put you with Joe for a week. And you have a week to learn what you need to do and how to be an armored platoon leader. And so I did. I rode with Joe for a week. And in that week, he taught me through his actions and through his steady leadership and his interactions with the men and just his general competence, which is something you can't learn in school. And he taught me enough to take over that platoon after a week and to survive the rest of that time. Now, Joe, and I really need some water. I'm sorry, could somebody get me a glass of water? Again, I apologize, but so let me tell you about the position of scout platoon leader and infantry in an armor battalion. It is absolutely the most demanding job in the entire armor battalion, maybe in the division. There is so much responsibility and stress and knowledge that's required, and I might add danger in that job than any other job. And as I took over his platoon, we worked together. Now, let me give you a little background. And I wrote the essay partly so I wouldn't have to I don't want to repeat it and go over what I already said. But just a little background. We were in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. The division, 4th Division, was in Pleiku, Vietnam. And there's a highway that runs all the way from Pleiku to Quy Nhon to the coast, Highway 19, famous highway, made famous by Bernard Fall in his book, The Street Without Joy. And it was our responsibility to secure that highway because the traffic on that highway, as one of your fellow classmates knows, that brought us beer on that highway, that there was convoys, constant convoys of trucks and military vehicles and civilian vehicles. And it was a very vulnerable highway. So it was our responsibility to secure that highway. And so there's a point called the Mang Yang Pass, which is where the highlands ends and the coastal plain begins all the way to An Khê and Quy Nhon. And we would patrol that, and that's what we did, and that's what Joe taught me to do. And it was our job to secure it, and during the day we would just hang around and wait for problems and ambushes, or if there was any problem at all in our sector. And at night then we would stay at one of the many bridges along the highway to try to prevent them from being blown up, mines placed and so forth. And my favorite place to hang out was a place called the Mang Yang Pass. And it gave a clear view. If you got on the east side of that and you could see down the highway, you could see almost all the way to An Khê, and you could see that highway. It snaked up the pass, and there was a place called Dead Man's Curve. In the French Indochina War, Dead Man's Curve was the site of a famous battle with the Viet Minh and the French. It was a French mobile unit, and they were wiped out. And we still saw those littered vehicles, those burned out vehicles, when we were there. And at the top of the pass was a French cemetery. So we would hang out there and then pick up a convoy or react to any problem. And the thing about Joe was his platoon his scouts, and they were not in tanks, they were in armored personnel carriers, and they would be all over the RAO. You'd constantly see them when you never expected it. And because that was their job, they were the eyes and ears of the battalion. And so we worked together a lot, we worked together a lot, and I personally saw his leadership skills, his ability with his men. This isn't something you're taught again, it's something, it's just part of you. And he had what it took. And the men just idolized him. They were so happy to see him when they'd stop by, and we'd maybe be at the top of the Mangyang Pass, and we'd walk down and just look over the countryside below us and think about those French soldiers and what this war was all about. And it was just a very special time with Joe. So that was our life, and it was just a daily routine until January 7th. We were called to the battalion headquarters in On K at Camp Radcliffe. And we were given a briefing and an operations order about an operation that was to take place the next day. Apparently what we were told, there was increased enemy activity in January because Tet was coming up and all the political stuff was going on, and so it seemed to be more enemy activity. And apparently there was an airstrike. The Air Force dropped a 750-pound bomb, and it didn't explode, didn't detonate. And so that's never a good thing to have that laying out in the countryside, because it comes back to haunt you. So they were going to plan for the next day a combined arms operation to go into that territory, which was just north of Highway 19, and it's called a reconnaissance in force. And we had the armor. Of course, we were in M48 tanks, and they also had mechanized infantry and tactical air and all of the units that were involved. And so I had never been involved in an operation like that. I'd been there 3 months. And so we were all kind of apprehensive, and or at least I was. I don't know about the others. And so after the operations order, the lieutenants, and there were 2 lieutenants in my company. There were 2 platoons that were active at the time where we were. And so there was my platoon and Lieutenant Brian O'Callahan. And then, of course, Joe's platoon, and then B Company and their lieutenants. Now, let me tell you about lieutenants in Vietnam. There was actually a shortage of lieutenants. You're only lieutenant for 2 years. And so they just didn't have enough lieutenants to fill all the slots. And we were a team, and we worked together, and we were very close. And we were consider ourselves brothers. And Joe was our leader. To be a scout platoon leader, the battalion commander selects the very best platoon leader in the battalion. Experience, competence, and leadership. And that was Joe. And we leaned on Joe a lot. He was kind of our force that held us together, because lieutenants were in a different position in the structure of the Army and the military. And so after the briefing, we went to the bar at Camp Radcliffe, and just got together, all the lieutenants, and we were processing what we were told, processing the information, what we had to do the next day, and just kind of, talking about it like you see in movies. You just get together, and here we are. Now, we knew that Joe was going to be leading this reconnaissance and force, this offensive, because that was his job. That's what the scout platoon did. And we knew that was going to be a dangerous job, and he just didn't ever express any qualms, any fear. He had total self-confidence in himself. He had total self-confidence in his men, and he had confidence in the leadership and the rest of us. And I'll just never forget that night. It's just really was burned into for some reason, my memory of that night at the officers club, and just sitting around and saying, well, this is the real deal, and this is what we're here for, and by gosh, we're gonna do our job. And so, as it turned out, there were two companies, C Company and B Company, and each company had just two platoons because they kept splitting off our forces. And so my platoon was part of the reaction force. In other words, after the initial assault, then they would call us to go wherever we needed to go, where we were needed. And so when the whole thing started on January 8th, my platoon was at the staging area where the headquarters, the tactical operations center was, the landing zone for the helicopters, because all of the colonels were up in their helicopters trying to direct it. And we were just waiting to see what happened. And I'll never forget that, because I'd never seen anything like it in my life. All of a sudden, they did a 1 hour prep. And I mean, we had artillery, we had tactical air, jets flying in, bombing, helicopter gunships. If you ever heard helicopter gunship, you will never forget it, I guarantee. And we were just watching all this, and so I was monitoring the battalion and the company radio networks, just listening to the traffic, and it was interesting, and you would get all the jet pilots and all that, the helicopter pilots. And I happened to have a cassette recorder with me, and it was in my tank, and I thought, well, I'll just turn that on, and because this be really interesting to have a recording of this. And things went downhill really fast. They once they moved into the operating area, the radio traffic got very there was a lot of radio traffic on both the battalion and the company nets. And Joe, of course, was leading the units. And I heard him call the battalion commander, who was up in the helicopter, and say, we're taking heavy fire, and we don't have enough force. We have to stop and regroup and wait for more force. Of course, I'm thinking, well, that's going to be us. And they were having that conversation. And meanwhile, my company commander, Captain Moeller, was the task force commander. And he was communicating with his tanks and units and trying to arrange under this increasing heavy fire that I don't think anybody was expecting. And then all of a sudden, I heard somebody from the scout platoon say, we have casualties, and we need dust off, we need medical evacuation. And then my company commander's driver of his tank yelled on the radio, "Sixes hit, sixes hit." Well, sixes was a designation for the commanders. And in fact, our vehicles had a big 6 painted on them. Like I was second platoon, so we had a 2-6, and the first platoon 1-6, and the company commander 6. And so I knew that that was our company commander, and he was hit. And, it was just like, of course I was stunned and waiting to see what happened. And nothing, there was no communication whatsoever. And so I didn't know what to do. I was just waiting there and I tried to contact the battalion, and there was no response. So I got out of my tank and went over to the Tactical Operations Center and ran into my old company commander, Captain Lindsay, and asked him what was going on and what should we do. Should I go ahead and go out if they need reinforcements? He said, "No, you stay here. Don't go anywhere. Just wait." And that's when he told me that Joe had been wounded, was a casualty, and had been either taken to the evac or had been evac, I'm not sure. And I told him, well, our company commander has also been wounded. I heard that on the radio, and he indicated he knew that as well. And then we watched while Lieutenant Bryan's tank came rolling into the landing zone, and we ran over there and asked the driver what's going on. They said, well, Lieutenant O'Callahan has been hit. So Captain Lindsay and I helped evacuate him from his tank and put him on a medevac. So it was really quick and got over quick, and as it turned out, that was pretty much the end of it for our battalion and our troops. And then I think later that day, the division airlifted a battalion in, and I don't really know what happened, because I was some few kilometers away from where all that was taking place. So I didn't really know what was going to happen. In less than a month later, our battalion was given notice that they were going to be deactivated and sent home. And the 4th Division, I think, was also going to be deactivated. And a month later, I received orders transferring me to the 173rd Airborne Brigade, where I served the rest of my tour as an infantry platoon leader in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. My memories of Joe are many and so fond. And I just remember he'd stopped by when we were at the Mangyang Pass. There was an overlook, and you could park 5 tanks there, so it was a good place to park. And occasionally they would stop by just to see what was going on, because he had all the information. He knew everything that was going on. He knew all the latest news, and everybody just really enjoyed seeing him and talking to him. And we would sometimes just walk out, look down at the east where the highway, and just watch the convoys and helicopters overhead, and those are some of my fondest memories of Joe. But as I said in the essay that I did, Joe was an exceptional leader, an exceptional lieutenant, an exceptional commander. I learned so much from him. He was my mentor, and the day after the January 8th, I learned that both he and Brian had been killed So we, in effect, lost all of our officers that day. And it was, as you can imagine, not the best day. But I've just, Joe's memory has always been there, and I'm just so glad to have made contact with Tony and to be able to be here with you and meet you. And I was going to leave it at this point. I don't know if my 5 minutes is up or not. Probably is. But I was going to stop, but I can only blame Father for this, Father Fields, because I asked him whether I should continue to the conclusion that I had decided I couldn't decide whether to do, but he said yes, I should. So, and where is he? He's. I told him I was going to watch him as I did this, but in 2013, I went back to Vietnam with my daughter, and we went to very many places in Vietnam, but Pleiku was one of the places we went to, and when we went there, we were picked up by this wonderful Vietnamese man, Mr. Hong, and he drove us around and looked at Pleiku and how different it was. And then the next day, he drove us down Highway 19, the road to An Khê that I've traveled countless times. And as we passed over the Mang Yang Pass, drove over it, we stopped and we got out and just looked down. And I was just struck by how quiet it was, how beautiful it was, how peaceful it was. And that really had an effect on me, I think, just to see that life can go back to normal. People would drive by and wave at us. And it was a great experience. The next day we left Pleiku, and he took us to the airport, Mr. Hong, and as we're getting out, he hands me a folded piece of paper and said, "Read this when you're leaving." And I said, okay, and we did. And it's a poem he wrote to us. And it's a short poem, and I'm going to attempt to read it. It may be difficult, but again, I can blame Father Fields because he thinks I should read it. So I'm going to. It's titled On the Mang Yang Pass for Tom and Sarah, Pleiku, 16 November 2013. On the Mang Yang Pass, I hear the wind whispering with grass. When the old soldier coming back with his daughter, I see the wildflowers waving with the warrior, like 1,000 souls of his friends. Say goodbye forever on the Mang Yang Pass. For how many people cry when we look up at the blue sky, tears coming down from your eyes and mine. Thank you. I'm not done. So, Joe is my brother. He's a brother lieutenant, and that makes Tony and I brothers. Yeah. And as my brother, I have a gift for you from 50 years ago. So when field troops in Vietnam had a special possession, it's called a poncho liner, and it's a camouflage blanket, insulated. We really liked them, and it was cold up in the highlands. But the thing was, the RIMPs, and I won't explain what that means, would take them and sell them to the Vietnamese or trade them. And then we would get to buy them back because they made articles of clothing. And so I have one here from 50 years ago, and it says, "When I die, I'll go to heaven because I spent my time in hell." And there's a big M48 tank, and it says, "On K Vietnam, 6970. And I can't think of anybody I would rather have this than my brother, Tony.
I cannot think of a more appropriate thing to do at this moment than to ask Davy Costco to please come forward and sing what may possibly be the most patriotic song I know. Davy, would you please come up?
Well, the good thing about this song, and it is a great song, it's God Bless the USA. And it's something that I would ask that y'all sing with me. Thank you, man. If tomorrow all the things were gone, worked for all my life, and I had to start again, just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars that I'm living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died and gave that right to me, and I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died and gave that right to me, and I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died and gave that right to me, and I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
We have another special guest whom John Toohey mentioned in his remarks. Another Army officer who was a very close friend of Joe, Roger Arango, got in touch with our family many years ago. He found, I think he found our name on the internet. He called one day. He said he was going to drive through Oklahoma, and he wanted to see if he could stop in Tulsa and meet some members of Joe's family. My brother Phil and I met with Roger, had a wonderful visit, and we've had a wonderfully close relationship ever since. As Joe's company commander, it was Roger who wrote the citation for the Silver Star that was awarded posthumously to Joe. The citation he wrote is in the case with Joe's medals in the lobby of the library where we were this afternoon. Roger Arango, graduate of West Point, 25-year veteran of the United States Army. Would you please come forward?
What Tony failed to mention is I'm a 67 graduate of West Point. So at least we have that number in common with all of you. Well, I have to observe the 5-minute rule, which is always problematic, but I will. I'm going to kind of refocus this a bit. You have heard everything I was going to say about Joe's character, his humanity, but I'd like to talk about Joe the man. Close your eyes for a second and think about what he looked like. I remember him in Vietnam. I visited him every day on the road. He was always sunburned. The Southeast Asia climate did not agree with him. He also had the brightest blue eyes I've ever seen. In the process of talking with him, he would share, we'd go out and I'd tell him what was going on in the battalion, and then we'd just sit and talk. And as no doubt all of you know, Joe was friends with everybody. Now, I was going to tell some more stories, pardon me. But I shared a story with Pat McLaughlin, and she said, you need to tell this story. Back in 69, 70, race relations in the Army were deteriorating. Joe's scout platoon was half black, half white. And the focal point of a lot of anger was the music they played. The black guys liked soul, Aretha Franklin. The white guys liked country and western. And Joe talked to me about that, so I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, well, I've got an idea. So he called his platoon together, and rather than trying to crack down and court-martial people and that sort of thing, he brought a cassette recorder out, and he played a record by Charlie Pride. Now, if you're not a country and western fan, you don't know who Charlie Pride is. The black guys got all incensed because it was country and western. Then Joe showed him a picture of who Charlie Pride was. And that seemed to resolve the issue. But that was the kind of guy Joe was. I'd like to go on a little bit further. One of the things that was mentioned, Joe showed me a picture one time. He was very proud of it. It was a picture of Joe holding his goddaughter, Melissa. In the interim, Melissa and I have corresponded. Melissa wears Joe's dog tags. Melissa found his rosary, and she has kept me apprised of what has been going on. I'd like you to think of Joe's life as a mirror pond into which a rock is thrown and the ripples spread. Those ripples have touched all of us. They've touched me and the friends I've made. I've talked to Bill Casey, which actually is what started my relationship with the Lauingers. As Tony mentioned, I've met the Lauingers. I've met you all here again today. So the contribution of Joe is the impact he has had on all of you for 50 years. 50 years. He was my good friend. Thank you.
John Joseph Jack DeGioia became the 48th president of Georgetown University on July the 1st of 2001. He is the first lay president of our university, and in August of 2014, he became its longest-serving president. Jack earned a bachelor's degree in English from Georgetown in 1979 and a doctorate in philosophy from the university in 1995. Prior to his appointment as president in 2001, Jack held a variety of senior administrative positions at Georgetown, including senior vice president and dean of student affairs. I think one of Jack's resume items, though, that would be of even more interest to some of the people in this room would be that when he was in school, he was a member of the Georgetown Hoyas football squad. Jack.
Thank you very much, Tony, and good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you and a privilege to have this opportunity to join in this celebration of the memory of Joseph Lauinger. As you could tell from the years that Tony mentioned, I came to the university in 1975 and spent a good deal of time in that library over those years, and so came to appreciate a little bit very early on the meaning of the Lauinger family, who now for a century have been a part of this community. And as we gather with members of the Georgetown class of 1967, as they recognize one of their own, and the men and women who served our nation at a time of great challenge, as we listen to the chimes who made this evening that much more special, and remember a young man whose legacy of service, whose commitment to his family, to his community, to this university, to his country, continues to shape us today. Each November on Veterans Day, we gather as a university community on the front lawn of our campus, right near the library that bears Joe's name. And in these moments, we spend time in reflection on the contributions of those who have served in our nation's armed forces, as so many of you who are here tonight did. And when we gather like that, I have been privileged to share Joe's story, his service, his leadership, his sacrifice, as a reminder to the 700 students in our community today who are veterans or who are on active duty, who are in one way or another connected to our military. And I've shared with them Joe's story to remind them of their connection to a heritage and to connect that heritage to a distinguished tradition of service that is present in this community today, and to share with them the deep way in which we respect and honor their commitment to our nation and its values. When we dedicated the Joseph Mark Lauinger Memorial Library 50 years ago, that same year that Joe died, Father Robert Henley, who was serving as our president at the time, spoke of the endurance of his leadership and sacrifice. He said, and I quote, "The new library will stand through Joseph as a monument to the Georgetown men and women who have sacrificed and given of themselves in peace as well in war. and Joseph Lauinger's name should provide the entire Georgetown community, students, faculty, Jesuits, alumni, and friends, with an enduring impetus and a perpetual reminder of devoted service and supreme sacrifice. Close quote. Well, there's something meaningful in choosing our university's library as the place to honor Joe and all those who made the ultimate sacrifice during their military service. Since the earliest days of our republic, our university community has been linked with the founding of our nation, a nation that made an unprecedented commitment to forming an educated citizenry, a nation that established a system of government sustained by civic responsibility and the participation of all people. We all are responsible for this common civic project. We all have a responsibility to advance and protect the common good. But among us are those who take on, in times of need, a special responsibility. In a letter to the New York legislature in June of 1775, written by our founding commander-in-chief, George Washington identified the ideal of the American citizen soldier and the understanding that citizenship in our nation would entail the responsibility to step away from our private lives in service to our country's deepest values. He wrote, quote, "When we assumed the soldier, we did not lay aside the citizen, and we shall most sincerely rejoice in that happy hour when the establishment of American liberty shall enable us to return to our private stations in the bosom of a free, peaceful, and happy country." Close quote. We honor this commitment. We honor Joe's life. And we do so today within the context of a university community, a place dedicated to the creation and dissemination of knowledge, to the formation of young people, to the unceasing advance of the common good. The Joseph Mark Lauinger Memorial Library is a reminder of this enduring connection between education and the responsibilities of citizenship that are required by all of us and that are demonstrated most deeply by those who have given their lives in service to our nation. So I wish to offer my deepest gratitude to Tony and the entire Lauinger family for the opportunity to be with you this evening. I wish to thank all of you who have gathered in Joe's memory, his fellow service members, classmates, friends, and family. We're deeply grateful to you all for your witness and your presence here this evening. We honor this evening the life of a young man. We honor this evening a community that was forged here on this campus. We honor this evening a community that accepted the responsibility of citizenship on behalf of all of us. So thank you for your presence, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to offer these brief reflections tonight. It's an honor to be here with all of you.
Jack, it is we who are honored by your being here tonight. Thank you very much. Brian Asplund, class of 1967, a great friend, a very active member of our class of 67 Day of Remembrance Committee, will offer some reflections of his own as the evening draws toward a close.
Well, the first thing I will do is be brief. I know. I've been out there. I was going to say a couple words which I'm not going to say, but we did want to just give a thank you to the committee that put this together. A number, 9, 10 people on the committee. I just really want to mention sort of the top 5 where the real work was done. And that's Joe O'Brien, Tony Lauinger, John Depew, Fred Gretsch. Who did I leave out? There you go. Thank you very much. And Tony, is there anything else? He went to the head, I'll bet. He's asleep. You're next.
I actually do have a few concluding remarks. One of the more realistic movies about Vietnam was based on a book with the poignant title, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. It seems so long ago now, that period when so many of our class went off to join the military. But when we think of those who died, it's as if they are frozen in time. In thinking about Joe, nothing has really changed over these 50 years since his death. Not our love for him, our sense of loss, our pain at his absence. In some ways, his presence among us is as strong and real today as it was then. And just as he was in life, Joe continues to be a catalyst for bringing together those he loved and who loved him in friendship, fellowship, and love. One of the most meaningful things that can be said about someone is that she or he had a positive impact on others while passing through this life. Your presence here tonight is testimony to Joe's having had such an impact. He touched so many lives during those brief, fleeting years when he was with us. He continues to touch so many lives today. I'd like to say something about the chimes. It would be hard to put into words just how much the chimes meant to Joe. They know, some of them even more than others. There have been 270 chimes through the 74-year history of the group. Joe is the only member of the chimes ever to have been killed in combat. The way the chimes helped our family deal with our grief following Joe's death, and through the intervening 50 years, is a gift we could never repay. And I hope our family has, in some small way, helped them to deal with the pain they have felt at Joe's loss. Joe was born on July 5th, the day after Independence Day. As it happened, Joe was home on leave for a few days before heading to Vietnam. And it was after Mass on the 4th of July, where the recessional hymn that day was America the Beautiful, that Joe left home for the last time. I once read a beautiful essay which concluded with these words: few of us have earned the freedoms we enjoy. We've received them by bequest, as gifts of grace. The freedoms we celebrate on Independence Day were made possible by the sacrifices we commemorate on Memorial Day. To the valiant few who paid the price, we owe an incalculable debt. Last June, on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I heard an interview with former Education Secretary Bill Bennett from the American Cemetery at Normandy. The cemetery there is one of many around the world where America's honored dead are laid to rest. Secretary Bennett related a poignant bit of history. 13 years ago, he said, there was a conference in England. A prominent European leader commented that this Iraq thing is just another effort to expand the American empire. A retired American general who was there heard the comment and responded. We have sent many young men and women abroad to fight for the freedom of others. The only land we have ever asked for in return was land to bury those who were not able to return home. By the world's measure, we members of the class of 67 are old, while some of our classmates, Billy, Donald, Pat, Joe, are forever young. May we benefit from the wisdom of age and from God's good grace to live out our lives in such a way that we might all one day be reunited forever in the loving arms of the Lord. And now, if you'll bear with me for a moment, there's one more thing I'd like to say to the Chimes and to Joe's family and friends about something that was not known to exist, or, as we know from Amazing Grace, something that was lost but now is found. Sometimes in decades past, the Chimes would record an album, some years, but not all. By happenstance, the period when Joe was singing didn't coincide precisely with the recording cycle, and there was no album recorded at that particular time. Occasionally, tape recordings were made of certain performances, but that was the exception rather than the rule. Well, a year after graduating, Joe got a couple of days' leave from the Army and came to Washington. He happened to be in town for Chimes Night at the 89 in May of 1968. I need to ask, please, for the assistance of Kleber Lohr, the hotel's AV manager who's been such a big help to us. And I'd also like to ask that the lights be turned down. Thank you, Kleber.
Thank you very much. As our next song, we'd like to call on Joe Lauinger to sing a song he made famous back in 1967 called Four Strong Winds. Four strong winds.
Do you care which verse I sing first?
Sing it backwards, Joe.
For strong winds that blow lonely, 7 seas that run high, all those things that don't change, come what may. But our good times are all gone, and I'm bound for moving on. I'll look for you if I'm ever back this way. Think I'll go out to Alberta, where there's good there in the fall. Got some friends that I can go to working for. Still I wish you'd change your mind if I ask you one more time. But we've been through that 100 times or more. For strong winds that blow lonely, 7 seas that run high, all those things that don't change, come what may, come what may. But our good times are all gone, and I'm bound for moving on. I'll look for you if I'm ever back this way. If I get there before the snow flies, and if things are going good, you could meet me if I sent you down the fair. But by then it would be winter, there ain't much for you to do, and those winds can sure blow cold away out there. Oh, strong winds that blow lonely, 7 seas that run high, all those things that don't change, come what may, come what may. But our good times are all gone, and I'm bound for moving on. I'll look for you if I'm ever back this
I'm going to ask that the lights remain dimmed for a minute because I suspect some of us may need a little time to collect ourselves. The one short sentence that Joe could be heard speaking at the beginning of the recording is a classic example of his dry, self-deprecating sense of humor. If you missed the line, what he said was, "Do you care which verse I sing first?" That's an inside joke with the chimes, which I'm sure wasn't lost on John O'Brien, who was Ephus when Joe was a neophyte. In a moment, the chimes will come up to conclude our program. I'd like to mention that the first song in this final set is a special request. It's very short, simple, and hauntingly beautiful. It was on the 1958 Chimes album that our brother Phil brought home after his graduation, and that Joe and I played so often that summer following Joe's 7th grade year that we wore the grooves on the record an inch deep. I requested that it be sung tonight because it's the song Joe sang at Chimes tryouts freshman year in the fall of 1963. The name of the song is Tea Leaves. May we have the lights back up again, please? And will the chimes please come forward?
Tea leaves read by a gypsy sent me in search of you. They said you'll find your dream girl. You'll meet her somewhere beyond the blue. And now that my arms enfold you, dear one, my search is true. My heart believes in tea leaves because those tea leaves brought me to you.
You got the people who are going to sing the solo.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah. We're going to do my comrades. This is a ready? My comrades, when I'm no more drinking, but sick with gout or palsy lie, exhausted on my sickbed sinking, believe me, then my end is nigh. But die I this day or tomorrow, my testament's already made. My burial from your hands I'll borrow, but without splendor or parade. And when me to my grave you're bringing, let follow after man by man. Let no sad funeral bells be ringing, but tinkling glasses be your stand. But die I this day or tomorrow, my testament's already made. My burial from your hands I'll borrow, but without splendor or parade. So take good care of yourself, put your wazoo on the shelf. Goodbye, farewell, a-doodly-doo. Goodbye, farewell, adieu.
Hey, could we have a little applause for Dave Costco? For Dave Costco put this whole thing together. David, great job.
Thank you all very much. Your being here made this a wonderful day of remembrance, and we all appreciate it deeply. Thank you.